Hello and welcome to the second video of this tutorial series where we are building an event planning application in GW Apps. Now, in the first video we created our application forms, and in this video we're going to be adding workflow to those forms. Workflow is essentially the process or life cycle that records we create with our forms should go through. For our application, we have two primary forms that each need their own workflow. We have our event form and our task form. Both of those workflows will be relatively simple. But it does help to first take a look at what we're going to build, get an idea of the kind of process we want, and then get started building. So we're going to do that with the event form first. We're going to look at what the process looks like very simply, and then we're going to build it out, and then we'll move on to the task form after that. So let's take a look at what that workflow is going to look like. So here's a very simple representation of what our event workflow is going to look like. We're only going to have three stages: draft, active, and archived, and of course a way to move between those stages. There's no automation in this workflow and there's no notifications, but once we get to the task workflow you will see some of that. So let's just get used to the workflow editor using this simple workflow, and then we'll move on to the task workflow so we can get into a little bit more advanced features. All right, so here we are in the event planning application that we started, and the very first thing we need to do is get into the workflow editor for our event form. Now there's a couple ways we can do this. We can go to the application settings on the left here, click Edit App, open up our event form, and then click the workflow card to get directly into that workflow editor. A potentially quicker way we can get there is if we have the form open or any of the views associated with the form, we can click this three-dot icon in the top right corner, and we can click Edit Form. That will take us to the Form Design Editor, and from here we can just move over to the Workflow tab on the top. Now the Workflow Editor is broken down into three main sections. We've got our stage list on the left. You can see right now we have a draft and a completed stage. These are default stages that are automatically created when you create a form. In the middle we have our security settings for the selected stage. You can see we've got our list of roles, some general permissions for those roles, and then we can configure some more granular security options for each role, choosing whether or not to show, hide, or allow users to edit specific fields, etc. Below that, we have our action buttons for the stage. These buttons are used to either move records through stages or trigger some other workflow actions, for example, notifications, emails, creating or updating records, things like that. Now we're going to begin by adding the correct workflow stages. Luckily this draft stage is good as it is. I am going to edit this completed stage, so I'm going to select this three-dot icon here. I'm going to click Edit Stage, and we're going to rename this to Active for our active events. I'm also going to add an icon, so I'll untick that. I'll click here. I want a calendar icon, so I'll type date, click on that one, click Update. Perfect. Now we just need to add our archive stage, so I'm going to click the Add Stage button. I'm going to type in archived, and I'm going to select the icon and type archive. We'll go with that icon, and let's give it just a light purple color, maybe. Click Create. Perfect. We have our stages, and now we just need a way of moving our records through these stages, and to do that we're going to use action buttons. So let's open up the draft stage, since that's where all of our records will begin. And you can see we've got this submit button. This button is a default button that is automatically added every time we create a new form. Let's open up the properties panel for this button to see what it's doing. So here's the properties panel for our action button. It's divided into four tabs. We have our actions tab where we tell the button what to do when it is clicked. We have a security tab for visibility of the button, things like that, who can use it, etc. We have a dialog for creating a confirmation dialog whenever the button is pressed, which is essentially just a window prompt that allows us to confirm our choice. We also have the formatting tab where we can control the visual appearance of the button. Now let's jump back over to the Actions tab. Here you can see we have two kinds of actions. We have conditional actions, which are actions that will run based on certain conditions. And then we have our default actions, which are the default actions of the button when it is pressed. We don't need any conditional actions for our submit button, and we don't need to change the default action because it's doing exactly what we want it to, which is changing the stage to active. I will add an action here. I want to add a redirect action, and I want to redirect to viewing the record. That way, when we submit it, we can just jump right into viewing it. Great. Now, I also want to change the name of this button. Submit is fine, but I want to make it something a little more relevant. So I'm going to click right here to edit the name of the button, and I'm going to type in publish event. Perfect. We could also change the name in the Format tab of the properties. Click there. You can see we could edit the button name right here. And I actually do want to change the visual appearance of this button. So I'm going to change the button type here to text and color. I'm going to change the button theme to flat. The button size as default is fine, but I will give it a different color. Let's go with a green color. Great. That way, when we are publishing an event, we know it's moving into the green active stage by the green button. I'm going to go ahead and save. And now let's move on to the active stage. So I'm going to click the active stage card. What we're going to do here is add another button, and it's going to move the record from the active stage to the archive stage. So I'm going to click new button here. We're going to call this archive event. Great. Let's create that. You can see the properties panel automatically opened. Let's go over to the actions tab, and let's change the default action to change stage to archived. Perfect. I don't think we need any other actions here. Let's just change the format of the button again. I'm also going to do the text and color, flat, and let's again make it a similar color to the stage that it's moving into. Perfect. And I'll save that. Great, now that pretty much does it for our event workflow. We will be coming back here to configure some of the security settings in a later video, but for now, this is good enough. Let's actually launch our form and test out our workflow. So I'm going to click the Launch Form button. Here we are in a blank event form. Let me just go ahead and create a new event. We don't need to fill out any of the other information, but if you look on the top here, we've got our Publish Event button. I'll click that. It's created the record, it's moved it to the active stage, and it's redirected us to viewing the record. And of course, in the active stage, we now have this archive event button, which we can click, and you can see it's now moved into the archive stage. So there's our event form workflow. Let's go ahead now and move on to the task form workflow. And again, let's start by looking at a quick representation of what that process should look like. So here's a very simple representation of the task workflow that we're going to build. We only need 4 stages for this workflow. However, this task workflow will still be a little more involved in the event workflow because we're going to add notification to notify task assignees that a task has been assigned to them. And we're also going to set up some automation to check the tasks for any that have passed their due date and automatically move them to a past due stage. There's the task workflow that we want to build, and I'm actually going to go ahead and build most of that off camera because the process is identical to what we just did with the event workflow. It's just adding stages and then adding action buttons to those stages to move our records through the stages. However, we are going to jump in, of course, and take a look at creating that notification and also creating that automatic trigger. So let's jump in and see where we're at. So here we are in the task form workflow editor, and as you can see, I've already added all of the stages we need, and I've also added almost all of the action buttons we need. In the planned stage, we have an in progress action button, which simply moves our record or our task to the in progress stage. Similarly, in the in progress stage, we have a completed button, which moves our record, our task, into the completed stage. Now we also need this button on the past due stage, and I want to keep all of the settings and colors, etc. for the button the same, but I don't want to recreate the button. So a quick way that we can do this is simply clicking this copy button. We'll get rid of the dash copy, and we'll move it to the past due stage. Click copy. Great. Now if you go to the past due stage, here's that completed button. It is identical to the other one. It retains all of its settings, all of its actions, and all of its visual formatting. Now let's go ahead and create that email notification. So I'm going to open up the planned stage, and I'm going to open up the properties for our in progress action button, and I'm going to add an action here. This action is going to be a send email action, and since we don't have any templates created yet, I'm going to click plus new. This will allow us to quickly create an email template. I'm going to name this template task assigned. Great. For the subject line, let's go ahead and say you've been assigned a new task for the following event, colon, @ symbol. This @ symbol will allow us to pull form data and add it to the email. So I'm going to click event for the event title. Now for the email body, it says show all fields right now. We don't want to see every single field there, so I'm going to select some form fields. And I'm going to choose the task title, event, start date, and due date. This will just create a small little table in the email, which will have all of the form data from these fields. And the email will also include a view record button so that anyone receiving the email can click the button and instantly be taken to whatever record it is associated with. The final thing we need to do here is change the recipient. We're going to do it field-based, and it's going to be that assignee field from the task form. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and save and add. Now our task workflow is nearly done. The last thing we need to do is create that automatic trigger. So what I'm going to do here is actually save and close. I'm going to open up Edit App, and we're going to open up the Triggers section, and we're going to create a new trigger. And let's call this trigger Set Tasks Past Due. We're going to select the task form as the form we are using, and it will be triggered on a schedule. Click Create. So here we are in the trigger form. This is where we create and configure our trigger. The first thing we want to do here is change the schedule. Let's go ahead and change it to daily. We want to check these records every day. For the hours of the day, let's do it nice and early in the morning. And of course, select your time zone. I'm in UTC -7. Great. For the active date range, we don't want to restrict the date range for the trigger. It's going to run always. So we can leave these as anytime and ends on never. Now the filters are very important. We want to filter this trigger to only look at specific task records. The first thing we want to do here is make sure that the status of the task record equals planned or in progress. We don't want to accidentally change completed tasks to past due because they have been completed. The other the other filter we need here is a filter for the date. So I'm going to select the due date, and we're going to say before relative. We'll put a 0 here. So what this essentially means is it's going to only look at records that are in the planned or in progress stage, and that their due date is before today. Now the very last thing we need to do for this is add an action. And for that one, we're going to select an action here, and we're going to use an update record action because we want to update our task records. Now let's go ahead and create a new one. Let's give it a fitting name, change task status to past due, because that's exactly what this action is doing. We don't want to update a record in a different form. This is the form we want. What fields do you want to modify? The updated by field has to be modified, and we'll just use the updated by field to map that. Let's add another field map here, and we're going to select status. We're going to choose custom, and we're going to put it into the past due stage. Let's go ahead and click create. Perfect. So that's all we need to do for this automatic trigger. Right now, this trigger will look at our task records every single day between 1 and 2 a.m., and it will only look for records that are in the planned or in progress stage and that have their due date before today, and it will change those tasks automatically to the past due stage. Let's go ahead and save. And the last thing we need to do here is just enable this trigger with this status toggle. So click that and then click yes. Great. This trigger is now enabled, and it will run as planned. That pretty much does it for our workflow. There is one more thing I want to do now that we have created the workflow, and that is configure one of the fields on the task form. So let's go over to the task form really quick by clicking it here, and let's open up the design editor. The field I want to adjust here is the event field. I want this field to only show events that are in the active stage of their workflow, not archived, not draft. So I'm going to open up the field settings. I'm going to go to the options, and I'm going to scroll down to look up filters. Let's go ahead and scroll down a little more. We're going to add a new filter here. We're going to select field, and we're going to go ahead and select the status field. We're going to say equals, and we want to only see, again, active. Perfect. Let's go ahead and save that. So there you have it. We have now finished the workflow for our application. In the next video, we're going to be creating some views so we can view our data in different ways. And then we'll be making just some small edits to the form, adding some of those views actually onto the event form. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.